there's always the conversation of formal and informal learning. And I do think a lot of companies teach employee resource groups, right? They put knowledge to them.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to talk about was...
You taught at the University of Maryland, leadership studies. What was a memorable challenge you had to overcome in that teaching that taught you about your own leadership abilities?
Yeah.
Put your L&D hat on. What are some of the benefits to you for, again, people listening who want to do this? Like, how does it help you?
You don't have to work as hard about buy-in because they are so people-driven that they're excited to kind of do something, right? So it's a I think a natural opportunity to connect with ERGs in a learning way.
It feels like a big benefit of this to the learners is that there is a sense of like self-awareness, of discovery, right? Of like identity.
It depends on how much you value authentic leadership. I do value authentic leadership. I think it's important, right? And so when we talk about authenticity in the workplace, you have to have self-awareness to be an authentic leader. I don't think we could have, as a company, had that conversation without the ERGs and without that partnership. And we were able to go so much deeper in terms of...
I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Initiative, creation, all these things which we value. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Teach people to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
Micheal, welcome to the show.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here in person. All right, so what was it like growing up with a bunch of South Africans in Maryland?
Oh, a phenomenal question, and I'm sure they will love the answer when I share this with them. It was great. It was a great group of people. I mean, this is silly as a kid, but there's this candy from South Africa. It's like green. It's like a green taffy kind of thing. Yeah, fizzers.
Yeah.
They would go every, a couple times a year and they'd bring it all back. And I remember
that stuff's like crack.
Those. They were so good. So really big, fun, loud community of folks to hang out with.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, because you spotted my accent right away. And then like that's from being around, that many South Africans. Cool. Yeah, I thought I'd throw that in there just to see where we go.
No, they'll be thrilled. They'll be thrilled it was mentioned.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so you taught at the University of Maryland, leadership studies. What was a memorable challenge you had to overcome in that teaching that taught you about your own leadership abilities?
Yeah. It's interesting because that class that I taught, Introduction to Leadership Studies, I think had somewhat of a stereotype of being an easy A, if you will, right? This kind of flimsy class, where you got to talk about this weird concept of leadership. And I think it took folks a little while to figure out kind of what leadership meant to them. But the challenge was really kind of adapting all of these leadership theories and even just who we consider leaders and the long history of how kind of power and privilege and identity play a role in leadership. Yeah. We had to unpack all of that for folks to really be able to say, especially young people, right, to say, oh, wow, this is the type of leader I can be. And also figure out kind of how leadership has shown up in their own lives, even at that moment. And so for me, it was really about adapting these really broad, vague concepts of leadership and figuring out how do I make this applicable to a very diverse group of students who also potentially weren't that interested in the concept to begin with. Yeah.
And what was it? I guess what was the purpose for them? Like what was in that curriculum and how did it fit in?
It was a general education class. So it met some of the requirements, which is again, I think why a lot of students ended up kind of taking the course and registering for it. Yeah. as we started to go through the class, though, right, read the books, kind of put together the projects, if you will, a lot of the students wanted to be leaders, right? They figured out, they're like, oh, this is something that I can step into, and I'm already doing it. And I think that maybe they registered, right, and they weren't really sure what they were going to get out of it. But I think by the end of it, they were able to say, here's how I've displayed leadership already. And I think especially as then they enter the workforce, it did give them a lot of talking points in those interviews to actually say, here's how I've been a leader.
Yeah. During your time on campus, you told me about the role of common interest groups, and you kind of saw like the impact that they had on the students. And obviously we'll get to kind of how you're seeing you playing that out now in a corporate setting. But can you talk through that? What was the role of common interest groups, and how did you see it playing out?
I think everyone goes to college, not everyone, but a lot of people go to college to figure themselves out, right? It's one of the big things college can offer people, right? Is an opportunity to uncover who you are in a new setting, away from your parents often, right?
Yeah.
And so common interest groups, I think historically we've talked about them as like extracurricular activities in air quotes, but I do think now there's more of an emphasis on in classroom and out of classroom learning, right? And those common interest groups, I think, are very much a place where out of classroom learning happens. And it's also where community happens, right? Where people figure out who they are, how they fit in, how they don't fit in. And those moments of discovery is learning in its almost purest form, right? Because you're not even in clubs, right? Or extracurricular groups, if you will. You're not necessarily even emphasizing that type of learning. But there is a moment, I think, after some type of experience where you go, oh, wow, I'm different. Or that felt different. Or, oh, I really want to explore that.
Yeah, learn more about that thing.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, I often have thought about this in the context of the cohorts and cohort-based learning, is that it's the motivational aspect, right? And so people, if you've self-identified as having that interest and you're all there for that reason, the motivation part's taken care of. Everyone's interested, curious. Like that just leads to a lot of good things. And most of that's learning, like you say.
You're excited.
Yeah.
Again, and everyone sharing a common interest, yes, you're right, like makes learning much easier, right? It's an easy thing in comparison, right, to that leadership studies class that I taught where everyone was coming out with a completely different interest.
Right.
Those common interest groups, those identity groups, the groups focused on people in any shape and form, again, inherently makes learning happen.
And I think that's one aspect of it before we move into the workplace is there's not a lot of formality to it. There's not a lot of like structure even, right? Or like there's a bit of structure, but it's very much like let people explore.
People driven.
Yeah, sure. That's a great way to say it. Yeah. Okay, so now the thing that you're here to talk about at ATD is the role of ERGs in learning, which I think is a pretty interesting novel idea. I haven't heard it talked a lot about. You've had great success with that. I guess was this from that insight on campus, and you sort of saw the role of these groups?
In like learning and development, there's always the conversation of formal and informal learning. And I do think a lot of companies teach employee resource groups, right? They put knowledge to them.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to talk about was how to actually leverage employee resource groups as a learning opportunity, as learning partners, because they are people driven and so much informal learning happens. And you don't have to work as hard, again, just like you said, right? You don't have to work as hard about buy-in because they are so people driven that they're excited to kind of do something, right? So it's I think a natural opportunity to connect with ERGs in a learning way.
Okay, so this is fascinating. So let's break it down a little bit. How did you first start with this? Like, what are you approaching the ERG? Are you approaching your learning leadership? Like, what is the?
again, I mean, I'm fortunate because our employee resource group leaders are phenomenal. I feel so lucky, to kind of collaborate with them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
There is a lot of, again, learning that happens in employee resource groups. So it's interesting because I was at the time both the learning and development person and a co-chair of an ERG.
You're on both sides.
I was on both sides, right?
Yeah.
So inherently, I'm going to approach the work with a learning mindset, right? So I was co-chair of our LGBTQ plus employee resource group. And, Pride Month rolls around and we hosted an allyship training, a very standard thing that I think most LGBTQ plus employee resource groups have thought about, right? It's not novel. It's not that exciting, but opening that up to the entire company and with some executive sponsorship and with some support and communications out to everyone. And again, with a learning and development focus, we were able to create this learning moment, a formal learning moment, right? From an informal ERG.
And that's the key, right? Because that's the insight here, is that there is learning happening. So let's almost recognize it. And are you taking it as far as saying measure it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the goal of the session is to really encourage learning and development professionals to think about how do we formalize some of that. Again, there's this fine balance of keeping it informal, keeping it people-driven, but yes, putting some learning objectives, holding ERG leaders accountable for that learning, and yes, measuring success, of course. So, and that can't happen if learning and development professionals aren't partnering, supporting, collaborating with ERG leaders who, again, ERG leaders are so cool because it's folks who typically do not have a learning background. They're not coming from HR. They're not necessarily people managers. They're not really thinking about people. And yet they go, I want to make community at my workplace because I see value in that. They're often high potential, right? Emerging leaders. How would why would you not want to
tap into that?
Right? Why would you not want? They're the best people to collaborate with. They really are.
Because people follow them.
Absolutely.
As well, right? Yeah. So, so how much of this relies on that person being a strong ERG leader, though?
I think some of it relies on it, but I think that's also then where, again, learning and development professionals step in and support, right? Not just from a learning perspective, but again, also supporting emerging talent, right? Supporting growing leaders, leadership development. This is where L&D folks come into play and go, yeah, this might be a new role for you, especially if you don't hold a ton of positional power, right? This might be a new role where you get to wield some of that power and you get to create something at this company. We need to be supporting them in more ways, for sure.
What does that support look like for people like listening in and thinking, oh, how do I start something like this?
A great question. I think there's a variety of things. Some of the things that we've talked about are executive sponsorship. So where I work, every single employee resource group has a senior leader, often at the executive level, in the leadership team of the ERG, right? So that's one. So when it comes to leveraging networks, when it comes to promoting events, here's this. And at the same time, they also show up at things, right? Executives will show up at ERG events. And that's really cool. Money. Money's always helpful. Even if it's a small amount, providing the ERG leaders with some type of budget to put on events, hire guest speakers, connect with nonprofits, right? All that kind of stuff, I think has been really impactful for us.
And are you just giving them free reign to kind of use that and bring the guest in that they want, or do you check any of that?
Yeah, so we do. Okay. And I think another thing that we've done is we host regular meetings across all the ERG leaders. So we can have those conversations. But that also goes back to the executive sponsorship thing, because when an ERG leader who's maybe not as in touch with the broader field, right, says, hey, we want to have a guest speaker for AAPI Heritage Month, right? Their executive sponsor potentially, and we've seen this, knows a phenomenal high up Asian woman executive that would come and talk.
Yeah.
And so, while yes, the leaders have some free range, we do also check in and kind of make sure that, that money is being used appropriately and wisely.
Yeah.
But again, that executive sponsorship and getting the ERG leaders in front of executives, in front of boards, out there, making sure that they have a presence in the company fosters all the things we've been talking about. Yeah.
So what are some of the benefits? You put your L&D hat on. What are some of the benefits to you for, again, people listening who want to do this? Like, how does it help you?
I mean, it makes learning so much easier. It makes my job easier.
Yeah.
So of course, why would you not want to do something that makes your job easier?
Yeah.
You get a group of people who are seeing the value of learning because we're talking about it more. Mm-hmm. They've seen their community grow and adapt and change. They've been able to collaborate with other people to create programming. Mm-hmm. So they've learned all these skills. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to see the value of learning. And then you've got a whole slew of people at the company who now are lifelong learners.
Yeah.
Which makes your job easier. It's and more fun.
Yeah.
Because you get to broaden and deepen those conversations. Like I one of the examples that I share is Women's History Month. Mm-hmm. So, our women's ERG, phenomenal, plans all these events. Then at some point they partner with the LGBTQ plus group to put on an event about trans women and what it means to be a woman and what that identity and challenge and struggle looks like. Mm-hmm. I don't think we could have, as a company, had that conversation without the ERGs and without that partnership. And we were able to go so much deeper in terms of Women's History Month programming because of that. Mm. And as a learning and development professional, it's great to see some learning, and then it's incredible to see even deeper learning.
Yeah. Before we get into, actually, no, I'm going to go there now because I think this is important. It feels like a big benefit of this to the learners is that there is a sense of like self-awareness, of discovery, right? Of like identity, also just sharing it with other people, right? And then people learning about each other, and that we see that in our work as well when we work with leaders is how important that is, right? Like breaking down the barriers so that people can reveal more of themselves and learn about each other, right? How important have you seen that being specifically for leadership development?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how much you value authentic leadership. I do value authentic leadership. Yeah. I think it's important, right? And so when we talk about authenticity in the workplace, you have to have self-awareness to be an authentic leader. Mm-hmm. In addition to the self-awareness, you also have to, in my mind, constantly be analyzing yourself and thinking about how your identity shows up and being aware of how others perceive you as well. I think that's all part of authentic leadership. And so having conversations about identity, and not all employee resource groups are around just identity, but many of them are. Right. Having those conversations, creating spaces where, again, especially like junior level employees, newer folks can showcase some of that authenticity, model vulnerability, exist in a space where they can be themselves, highlights authentic leadership. Yeah. It just creates an environment around it, which is really cool. And then, you get the executives who roll up to these events and share a story. And maybe it's a story about failure. It's a story about identity. And all of a sudden, we're witnessing authentic leadership at all levels, which is really powerful.
There's like an element of permission here, right? Like you giving people permission to be themselves, especially like you say, when an executive comes in and models that.
Yeah. Just like college, right? You show up to campus, you're figuring out who you are. Yeah. You find a space that allows you to be yourself.
Yeah.
That becomes your friend group often, right? Our friends from college, it's rarely born in the classroom, right? Your friends don't necessarily come from like the kids sitting next to you in the classroom. It comes from the stuff outside of the classroom. And I think in the workplace, I don't want to infantilize anyone, but when we join a new workplace, we're often doing the same thing. We're trying to figure out who we are in this new environment, maybe meet some people, find some social support. And so having an opportunity to be yourself, creating a space where you say, hey, you can be you here, that begins to permeate through an organization.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges with this? Like I anticipate one being that people can have their perceptions of themselves challenged, right, by others, and maybe have those moments of like, oh shit, right? This is how I'm perceived. How have you seen that play out? And then I'd love to hear what other challenges you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, I was thinking like two major challenges, and one of them for sure is discomfort, which I don't necessarily think is a challenge because I think that's growth and development, but certainly having conversations about identity is hard.
Yeah.
They're hard. They're hard conversations.
It's deeply personal.
It's deeply personal.
Yeah.
We don't have all the answers.
Yeah. That's the other thing. It's gray, right?
We rarely know everything about ourselves.
Yeah.
And you're right. In a new environment, when we're talking about identity and those questions are raised, it can be tough. So I think it's very reliant on a trusting and psychologically safe workplace culture, right? This doesn't really work in a toxic workplace.
Yeah.
But we often say in our learning sessions, I'd rather have folks make mistakes there than out in the real world, in air quotes, because the workplace is the real world.
Yeah.
But I'd rather in like an allyship training, someone use the wrong word and then have the facilitators have a conversation about that in there where folks can feel comfortable to make a mistake and fail, and then they won't do it out in the world. And I think the other main challenge, especially for learning and development professionals, is you have to relinquish some of that control, which is hard.
That is
you
hard.
know, as a L&D person and anyone who comes from like teaching, right? You've put all this effort into curriculum design and learning objectives and a structure, and it's less impactful when it's purely driven by L&D. Having the ERG leaders really drive these initiatives is what makes them useful, but it involves
a trade-off. Of letting go. And so for people who like myself who struggle with that, how do you, I guess, like how, I'm trying to think what the right question even is here. Like, what is the how bad can it get, basically, right? Like, what have you seen?
I mean, I don't think it can get that bad unless folks are just running completely amok, right? And then again, because we're having conversations about identity, I think if it's not as trusting or psychologically safe spaces, folks can feel hurt.
Yeah, that maybe is actually the better question. Is like what kind of conditions are necessary for this to work?
Yeah, I mean, again, trust, empowerment. I think there also has to be space for failure, right? And space for discomfort, especially around identity and things like that. So I will say though, right, when the executives have been brought in and are supporting the ERGs, folks feel pretty okay, right? They go, okay, we spoke to our executive sponsor about this topic. They're going to be there. They want to support it. They're going to share their story. Well, okay, that makes things a little bit easier to leap into a session than if all of a sudden there's someone there and you go, oh, wow, we didn't prep for this at all, right?
Totally, yeah. That almost feels like a key prerequisite, like having that leadership presence there to say to everyone, like, this is normal.
I mean, isn't that the case for all learning and development stuff? Is having executives,
Very
leaders buy into it is... It's not a requirement. I think I've seen plenty of shit get done. But it's really helpful. It makes things so much easier.
Yeah, it's almost a case of like, why are we even doing this if the leadership's not bought in, right?
Unless we're really trying to challenge something, right? Really trying to upend or subvert something, right? And we're taking an L&D approach to do that, which I think is an interesting one. having leaders bought into it, especially at all levels, is crucial.
Yeah. How do you encourage people to like, and I don't know if you even do this, but encouraging people to come to other ERGs, right? To like learn and because I'm very fascinated by the idea of diversity of perspectives in creativity, right? Like the more diverse perspectives you can bring in, the more worldviews, the more ways of looking at things, the better.
It's been the goal from the very beginning to have the ERGs collaborate with each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been the most successful. That's led to the richest, deepest learning that we've done is when the ERGs partner together.
Okay.
And again, part of it is I think we just maybe got lucky with this incredible group of leaders who were like down to try anything. Yeah. But meeting on a regular basis with the ERG leaders, placing them as a group of people into positions of notoriety. So we've had them present at company-wide town halls. We had them go to a full board dinner with the entire board and talk about their ERGs. Getting them to see their other leaders as colleagues and collaborators and peers makes that much easier so that, one of the most successful ones we've done is, so Pride Month is in June. Juneteenth is also in June. Having our Black, African-American, and African ERG with our Pride ERG collaborating on a Juneteenth event is really powerful. We've got to have really cool conversations. And again, it's partly because at these monthly check-ins, everyone kind of shares, here's what we're working on. And as again, I was a former co-chair of this. So as I would say, well, we're gearing up for Pride Month, the leader of the Black, African, and African-American ERG goes, well, we're planning Juneteenth.
Let's do something together.
Let's do something together.
Yeah. And so much of this is just about that coming together and then the conversations that happen, right? Yeah. And it's in that sharing of stories and that all the magic is.
And that conversation. So how it's worked for us is those moments of, hey, I'm doing this. Hey, I'm doing this. Let's do something together. That happens between the ERG leaders. What happens next? How do we do something that is focused on learning? What are the learning objectives? What do we want to get out of this? How do we want it to feel? That's when L&D steps in. That's where I get to come in and just support them. I'm not even, I'm not driving the train by any means. Right. I'm simply there to say, hey, did you think of this?
Yeah. Yeah. And they've been obviously open to that. You have a great group, great working relationship there. That was I think my last question on that was the formalization part of it. What's that process look like been for you, right? To distill takeaways and share them, with the greater org, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So again, luckily we get pretty good attendance at our ERG events, right? So there's a pretty good swath of the company that rolls up to these things. We've also really worked on learning objectives, right? That helps formalize some stuff.
Yeah.
Tying it to the performance management, the performance review, having the ERG leaders include their work in their professional goals, having their managers being supportive of that helps formalize this as well. And then recording, sharing, keeping the conversation going. Again, especially with these really powerful identity conversations, it's very rare for us to do a one and done. And having that collaboration allows, a lot of the ERGs have their own month, right? There's an AAPI Heritage Month, there's Black History Month, there's Women's History Month. And I think it could be very easy for folks to be like, well, March is my month, so no one else can plan events during our month. Yeah. And that just hasn't been the case because folks are like, well, we also want to this is a special day this month, so we really want to celebrate it. And, whoever's in charge of that month goes, awesome.
Yeah.
So it's not just a one-off, this was the month and that's it. Yeah. There's programming throughout the year, and that keeps that learning momentum going.
Yeah. And is this, do you think, unique to where you work, or have you seen...
ERGs are not unique to where I work, right?
Yeah, and I'm so more in that the fact that it's so there's such a positive collaborative nature to what you're describing.
It's certainly been a great experience where I work. I I don't think it needs to be unique. I think that's really where we could see more support and more development of ERGs from a learning perspective. And I think we're just not tapping into it as much. I don't even think you have to work that hard to do it. I think it's really, I know learning development professionals that we're busy and we're often very small shops, right? And we're operating at large companies trying to do a lot of different things. And so sometimes it can feel like I don't want to step on the ERG's toes. This isn't necessarily the point of them. But I do think learning is happening, even if it's not the point. Yeah. And so why would we not want to capture that as the overall learning that's happening in the organization? So I don't think it needs to be unique. I think we just need to look into it a bit more.
Yeah. I feel like that's like the real insight that you're sharing here, that question, right? It's happening already. Where would you like to see this go? That's kind of, because I feel like it's, like we said, right? It's not super well talked about. You've seen great success with it. I think a lot of people listening are probably now interested in this, especially if they're hearing like, oh, it's going to make my job easier as an L&D person, right? Where would you like to see this go in the future?
I mean, I want to see learning and development professionals just reach out to the ERGs. I think that's the easiest way to do it. You just say, hey, how can I support you? Which is a question L&D professionals ask people all the time, right? It's like, how can we make this a learning opportunity? Because it's, again, already happening.
Do you think people think of it as a learning opportunity, or do you think that conversation still needs to, I mean, it's an educational conversation?
I think when you look at ERGs, they are learning opportunities. Yeah, I'm like, I think it just needs to be asked. I think it's there. I think it's obvious. Again, because we've seen it. We see it in high school. We see it in college, right? Like it's, the extracurricular stuff doesn't go away. We see it as adults, right? We have clubs, we have friends, we've got groups of people that we join for a reason, a shared interest, a shared identity.
And you're learning from them.
And you're learning from them all the time. Yeah. Why would you not repeat that in the workplace?
Yeah. That's great. That was the question I wanted to ask. So great answer there. Okay, so now two more questions. One, as an L&D person, right? I'm going to give you a scenario here. If you had to, you had a limited budget, like we all do. You had to prioritize and focus areas. You had to choose between enabling leaders to lead through change or retaining top talent, high potential talent. Where would you focus?
Yeah. For me, enabling people to lead is retaining emerging talent. And I don't love the concept of high potential talent in air quotes, because I think there's so much unconscious bias that goes into that. Who's a high potential talent at one place may not be at another place, right? Like it's so amorphous. Subjective. It's so subjective. It's so amorphous. And research has also shown that there's just a ton of bias built into that. And so I think when you enable people to lead through change, you are actually creating an environment where talent emerges, right? Like you're creating an environment where people are more adaptive, they're more flexible, they're more responsive, and that, all those things, those are the attributes that we prescribe to emerging talent. So it's a chicken before the egg kind of thing for me. And I'm going to say enabling people to lead, because that happens at all levels.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And so I'm asking this question in every one of these live ones, and people listening will hear these answers. There's a remarkable similarity about the answers, which is really cool to hear. So it was great to hear yours on that. What's some of the things that you've tried to help leaders enable through change, lead through change?
I think conversations about failure is one of the easiest ways to do that. It demonstrates vulnerability, and I think that is one of those key elements to flexibility, to adaptability. One of the things that I really pushed was to have my executives share stories of failure. And luckily they were all game. So because when you hear a leader talk about, even if it was 20 years ago, hear them talk about how they didn't lead through change, right? How something didn't go well.
Yeah.
People go, okay, I can make mistakes.
They're human.
They're human. I'm human.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's been really powerful to see that modeled at such a high level.
Yeah.
And I think it's just an easy way. We've even talked about like having failure Fridays, right? Where like in our daily newsletter, a thing that we send out, we could have a leader, just share every Friday a story or an experience of how they were challenged by change. And in that, I think not only do you learn vulnerability and you learn adaptability, but you also learn about what not to do, which is learning as well.
Yeah, because so that idea of capturing those stories is so powerful, right? Because first of all, I think stories are conveyors of meaning, right? They're like containers of meaning. And the thing with dealing with change is that you cannot write a manual for that because it's always going to be different, right? And the benefit of hearing those stories as a leader or an emerging leader is that you learn mindsets and ways of thinking about things that you can then apply to whatever the changing circumstance that you're in, right? That's really the key of this.
It's not new. You go on TED, TED Talks, every person talking about leadership includes some story about failure. It includes some story about something that didn't go so well for them, a moment of change, a moment of transition, a moment of learning. Yeah. That's what all of this is. And so
it's almost a prerequisite of being a good leader, right?
Agreed. I think, absolutely. I think if you've been privileged enough to not have to deal with anything terrible, I'm not entirely sure how good of a leader you can be because it's not real. It's not a realistic experience.
House of cards. Yeah. I mean, it's like at some point that wall is going to get hit and broken. And
if you can't talk about it because we know that it's happened, it impacts that authenticity piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Which shuts off then the psychological safety, the trust, all these other things that we've talked about. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I have one more question for you, and it's about you. What's next? What are you looking forward to for yourself, and what value do you want to embody into that?
Yeah. You kind of know the answer to this already, but I am about to embark on a brand new life journey of having my first child. Yeah. So that's what's next for me. Yeah. I will be taking, for the first time in my life, some time off of work, which is, I think, a unique experience for me for sure.
How long are you taking off?
I'll be taking off 6 weeks.
Nice.
But again, in addition to that, I feel very, I have a very flexible boss, and just, we'll make it work.
Yeah.
But
the new routines you'll have to learn.
Routines. Yeah. But the value, and it's so fitting that this is the topic, because the value I'm really trying to embody is community. I've talked about this a lot with my husband. I think sometimes when people have kids, it's easy to turn inward, right? You have a new family structure and it's stressful and you're sleep deprived and everything kind of goes inward.
Yeah.
And you kind of hold yourself up, right? And I get it. I understand it. And then I've also witnessed people turn outward. It's community. It brings people. It takes a village. All of those mottos, all of those adages, right? But community is really the value that I want to embody as a new parent.
Yeah.
Community has been so important for me as a queer man. That community, there's something to be said for being in space where you can be wholly yourself.
Yeah.
And when I think about raising a child, I think about my family, I think about my friends, I think about my workplace. I think about all the people who've been so supportive along this journey and making sure that they continue to be a part of it. So that community value is really essential.
That's amazing. Your little one is going to be lucky to have you. It really,
We're
really
hoping.
is. Yeah. and good luck and all of that. It's going to be a crazy next maybe 10 days ish.
Sure, yeah. It's going to be a little nuts for now, and then I've heard probably another 18 years after that, and then maybe the rest of my life.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's an exciting time.
Yeah. Why do we do this again?
I don't know.
Micheal, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much. It was a blast.
Hello. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It's Andrew again with a quick message. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to leave us ratings and reviews where you listened. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe buttons and feel free to leave a comment. We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please take the time to give us a rating and leave a review. Once again, we love hearing from our loyal listeners. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please hit the follow button to make sure that you don't miss new episodes as they come out. See you next week for another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. Thank you for listening.